The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
Basically, I've been having a lot of conversations with Tanya and Katarina, and it has helped me a lot to create some kind of, roadmap to where they come from and where I am. And as a result, I've been starting to really very closely see where certain obstacles are more present and where they are less present. Because honestly, when it comes down to awareness, if I talk to someone, I see myself. If they talk to me, they see themselves. So basically, you always have some kind of disconnect, in a sense, where you're filling up the gaps of information with your own idea about these things. And that can cause quite some disconnect when it comes down to communicating a certain insight or whatever. And that's why you have actually a two-way road. On one end, you need to explain the insight in a way that is understandable for the person that listens. And on the other hand, the person that listens need to have a really strong will to actually try and listen and understand. So if you don't have these two elements, then basically communication is just a waste of your energy. I want to say that first because it is very important to understand that when I'm talking about these things, it's because I realize that I'm taking certain things for granted when I'm talking to people, and I forget how big of a deal it is in the extent to which I'm able to be who I am. So making sense your core value has been something that really defines my life. Basically, I go through life with really seeing at things from a making sense point of view, really on a core subconscious level. And what I've been doing is I've been telling people like, hey, you got to be understanding that this is an emotional thing. You can't just argue your way into adopting making sense or implementing making sense in who you are, because it is an emotional thing that happens on a subconscious level. And I talked about the inner child as a way, as a bridge to try and make you feel like, oh, you don't have to be scared. You don't have to feel, unsafe, because your inner child doesn't really understand so well these rational concepts. It's more primitive. It's more emotional, and that's why the inner child example is a very nice way of creating that bridge between your rationality and your more subconscious part. Of course, when I say that, every single person that is listening to the live stream will have a different idea of inner child. Some people will see it through more identification of like projecting to the inner side. Another person might think like more on a conceptual level. It's just depending from person to person. When I'm explaining this, different people will understand it different. Same with everything that I'm actually talking about. Even making sense, implementing making sense as a core value, some people might really understand that I'm meaning to make it part of your identity, where making sense is very valued. But that's not what I mean. Like making sense your core value is not making it part of your identity. It's rather just, valuing that the most, not because you are valuing it the most, but just because it is. If you come from a place where you're very unself-aware and where you're extremely focused on the self and quite selfish, then in order to connect to you and make you understand and give you the will to do something, I have to translate it into selfish terms. For example, growth. Everybody wants to grow. Whether you want to climb in a League of Legends ladder, or whether you want to get better at life or better at getting girls or whatever, you have to grow. So that's a concept that can very easily be connected with your selfishness. And as a result, growth is quite easily compatible with most people's values. And that's somewhere you can start, like focus on growth, because growth just allows you to achieve more and make you feel better. Even if it's about happiness, you can focus on growing happiness. Growing laziness doesn't sound so cool though, but like just making yourself more comfortable, you can grow towards a situation that gives you that. So growth is really quite universal, easily to applicable in a very selfish context. So you might wonder like, okay, why are you explaining this? Because when it comes down to awareness and when it comes down to values, if the value requires a too high level awareness, then you have to first, you basically have to work yourself towards making sense. And what I'm going to talk about today is a certain component that has been essential in my growth and who I am now that I haven't talked about yet. I have brought it up very briefly when I was talking about truly understanding me, but I'm going to elaborate on it today because I do really think that it can highly help people to understand how to get there themselves. So basically, It's about being selfless. So like a lot of people are very selfish. They look at the world from a very selfish point of view. And I also want to say, in order to understand what I'm talking about today, it's important to be in the present. If you're caught up in all your ideas and you think about all these things in the wrong way, you won't even be able to really truly listen. So truly listening is quite important in this conversation. So for the people that don't know, maybe reading The Power of Now can really help you, watching the podcast as well, and basically exercising, meditating, eating healthy, all these things can help you. Like, will give you more ability to understand what I'm going to talk about, because it's going to be quite advanced yet quite relatable, I hope. Selflessness is the opposite of selfishness. When you're selfish, you do everything for yourself. When you're selfless, you do everything for the collective. The thing is that, to me, being selfless is very essential to who I've become. And to people that which life is very selfish, it's very hard to relate to this selflessness. They look at it, they almost see it as a threat, like, why would I want to be selfless? Because it would actually take away everything I have, all these luxuries. I have to start putting time and effort in helping other people. I don't want to do that. I want to just take care of myself. I'm already struggling with myself, let alone other people. So you have all these fears and this protection of like keeping what you have. But if you look at growth, and you have the ability to just focus growth from a very, selfish angle, because that's more compatible, you can start growing. And as a person, when you grow with a strong direction, and I think the podcast can help, like doing self-development can help, you can all do that from a selfish framework. But when you then start thinking about making sense, I do understand, and I can relate that quite some people might really see it as a threat. They go like, I have all this stuff, I'm feeling great, why in the world would I decide to make sense? Because with everything I've been listening and all the podcasts, it immediately means that I have to start, being all the selfless guy that really starts putting time and effort in the world and start to really contribute to other people's world. I can't even deal with my own problems, let alone starting to make sense my core value. Okay, I hear that it's going to make me more successful, more this, more that, but honestly right now it just looks like too much. I can't digest it. It's just too much of a gap, too much of a bridge between the selfish things you value currently and the more selfless making sense mindset. So what I started realizing is that selflessness is a very important component in becoming more making sense wise in a calibrated way. Because if you're very selfish oriented, a lot of things that you do don't make sense. And as a result, you experience a lot of dissonance, and that takes you away and pushes you basically away. One thing that helps, and I've also been talking to Katarina and Tanya about this, is like right action. Because right action allows you to do something right from a selfish angle. Because helping and contributing to other people, releases dopamine and such. Like, it makes you feel good to do random acts of kindness. Of course, if you do it too much from a validation point of view and you have too much, expectations and you want something in return, that can actually go against these positive feedback loop. But if you don't expect anything, you just do a selfish kind action, it actually makes you feel good. A lot of people will feel good. Not everybody, but a lot. And by doing right action, you can really slowly transfer from a more selfish mindset to a selfless mindset, because as you do more and more right action, you feel more and more fulfilled, and it also allows you more easily to be in the flow. Then when you're fully in a right action mindset and you really value right action a lot, it's much easier to make the move to making sense, because then it's just a more advanced and a more compatible way of just understanding, like aligning beliefs with reality. This is not the advanced stuff. This is just a little introduction to start talking about the core ID. And the core ID is the selflessness. How am I selfless? And the thing is like, okay, of course, right action has helped me a lot to grow into that, but I've been quite a lot part of my life quite selfless. And the reason why is because I've always had enough, because of the amount of love I've gotten when I was younger and such. And I always had a strong urge to give. So that's just me having good RNG, got lucky. Basically, that's it. Although, when it comes down to selflessness, definitely in the society today where with social conditioning everything is surrounding the individual and such, selfishness is really overly marketed and promoted, and it's almost like indoctrinated completely in who we are and fully how we look at ourselves. So now, how do you overcome that? And the thing is like, there is something that I didn't realize, and I only realized it when I was talking yesterday to the girls. And that is that when I was explaining about truly listening and saying like, okay, if you guys truly listen to me, let me explain you guys how I go through life. When I wake up, the I doesn't exist. I don't really experience myself. I more have a collective awareness. I just go through life and my actions just flow out of my awareness of just trying to contribute to what I am. And what I am is not just me, but it's the unit, it's the collective. And it's really a pure understanding on a neurological level and also on a subconscious level that we're all connected. And disconnecting ourselves is something that is actually against what we are. When you look at it from a neuroscientific point of view, literally the people around you in your environment are part of what you are on a neuroscientific level. Like these are neural networks. And the reason why someone yells at you and you get annoyed, it's not because you are getting annoyed by this person, but it's because there is inner conflict within your consciousness between the neural connections that represent that person and you. And that's why you experience dizziness. It's not because it's happening, it's because it's happening in your consciousness. So basically everything you do, your entire drive is all derived by what's happening within your consciousness, within that experience. If you wouldn't experience that person, even if he was there in objective reality that you could still argue whether that's possible or not or exist or not, like you wouldn't see it, you wouldn't experience it, he wouldn't be there for you. So the only extent to which people are in your environment is the extent that they manifest themselves within your consciousness. And this is really from a very simple neurological point of view. This is not me trying to go, spiritual or whatever. This is just like pure, simple neuroscience. Anything that takes place in your consciousness exists for you. Anything that doesn't take place in your consciousness and your subconsciousness is just not there. It's that simple. It doesn't interact. It's almost like a ghost could be flying around here for all we care. If it doesn't interact with your consciousness, if it's not part of your consciousness, it's not there. Funny enough is, if it is part of your consciousness and it's not there because nobody else sees it, right, then it is part of your experience and you would see a ghost. So the extent to which things exist and things don't exist is the extent to which they exist within your consciousness. Basically, why do I explain all this? Because I truly understand that. I truly understand that me is not just the concept of me or the concept of the identity of me. Me is much more than that. It's my environment, it's everything around me. And understanding that allows me to basically look at the self from a more accurate point of view. So being selfless to me just means being selfish in a more accurate way, because I'm still selfish. But the selfishness doesn't just provide for me, but just provides for the collective, basically, because that's what I am. So you now might say like, okay, that's interesting. So what is the mindfuck? Why are you, because you said it's quite meta. The thing is though, what I didn't realize is I explained this many times, but I didn't explain it through the subconsciousness. So just like when I was talking about making sense, and I say making sense is looking at the inner child and stuff, I basically use a concept of identity of the inner child to explain another concept. But the thing is, if I apply this insight on the inner child that you are, I'm basically misrepresenting what you are. Because just as much as I don't exist and you don't really exist, the concept, the idea, the inner child doesn't exist either. And that's where it becomes very meta. Because when you look at yourself, your core self, when you look back, even your subconsciousness, that inner child that is scared and that feels wants safety and warmth, even that is defined, is channeled through that child, through that identity. Because the child, to put it that way, has learned to see itself through the eyes of others. But even the eyes of others is part of what it is. And basically the essence of what you are is not your inner child. The essence, it's more than that. And the moment you start realizing that, really truly, the inner child understands that it is more than just the idea that it has, and it starts just merging with everything around it on a very subconscious level. And that's when the selfish becomes the selfless, because you really understand on a subconscious level that you are not the inner child, that you are not just this child. No, it's your entire environment. And when you think about safety, or when you think about fear, or when you think about anxiety, it's not about these concepts that just, get channeled through the child. It's just what it is. And basically, it is an expression of the experience you experience, which includes your environment. And the disconnect is what creates the duality. The moment you fully accept that and you understand that your essence is not just the inner child, but like everything surrounding it, you can look back and really vibe that more primitive part with what it is, which is everything that it is active, like all the neural activity that emerges from it. And doing so really allows you to just connect the more subconscious part with a pure channeling of your experiences through a lens that is just more accurate. You might wonder, okay, like this is quite of a mindfuck, but the thing is like, the essence of what you are is basically everything you experience. And the child is basically just your essence trying to understand itself. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And when you experience all these fears and all these anxieties or this joy or this love, it's literally just itself. It's the essence itself trying to understand itself. And our concepts of, oh, this is another person and this is another person and this is one gives me love and I have to be feared, it's just like practical labels that have allowed you to be more compatible with your survival and has allowed you to be able to make a distinction with your environment and that sense of identity. But in reality, they are all connected. And that is why you value so much what other people think. That is even why you can only see yourself through the eyes of others. When you start looking at certain, sociological studies about certain tribes that don't work with time, for example, or certain tribes that can't lie, these people go through life in a completely fundamental different way, because that's how they grew up. And if you look at their inner child or whatever, they might just not have an inner child at all. And basically what is actually limiting us to completely experience that selflessness is not so much that, we have to come to this understanding, but it's because we've been wrongly indoctrinated and socially conditioned. We literally even have a wrong view of our child, our inner essence. We see our essence always in a certain level selfish. When you think about your pure essence, you think on a certain level that it's selfish. But the thing is, that essence, that self in your essence is everything. And if you fully connect to that and you fully understand that, you really just, open up and you really start realizing that you're completely connected with everyone, because that's what you are. I also want to say that when it comes down to truly listening, when you're truly listening to someone, the reason why you can so easily experience that person when you truly listen and truly vibe is because on a subconscious level, the duality between you and that person vanishes and it becomes one, because that's what it is. And the more you're connected to a person, the more this synergy expresses itself on a subconscious level. So basically, when you fully truly listen to me and you really experience what I'm saying, the reason why that is, why you experience it really as part of you, is because it is part of you. It's just because the duality is completely gone. So as you talk to other people and as you basically literally, almost merge with them by talking to them and truly listening, it's not because it's a neurological process that is tricking you to do so, but it's literally because that's what you are. You are the expression which contains everything. The self is that, the essence that you are is everything around you. It's not just the idea of the self or the identity or the child. And that's where I miscommunicated myself when I was talking about making sense. I say, think about the inner child, but the inner child actually doesn't even exist. Like the inner child is just these emotions, these subconscious emotions, these core emotions that try to channel themselves through this idea of this inner child, because that's what it has learned. That's how the essence has learned to come to be. At the end of the day, we are all just an expression, an experience that tries to learn itself, and doing so is only able and capable by its surroundings. But even the surroundings is part of itself. And if you fully understand that and can completely merge with that idea, you experience no disconnect between you and your environment, and the sense of identity or the sense of self just completely dissolves. And as a result, you just become one with what you are, and every single action becomes selfless. And then the moment you are in that part, when you're fully selfless and you understand that your actions are just more about making a difference and moving forward as an organism rather than as that flawed paradigm of the self, you start much more be in line with reality and start to thrive a lot more, because that's what you are. You are the collective awareness. And people that think about things, they think really in a personal awareness because they're limiting themselves, because they think in the sense of identity. But you are a collective awareness. Your ability to think, your ability to speak, your ability to communicate has been brought there by a collective awareness. You're basically speaking the language that has evolved 10,000s of years, if not millions of years, like evolution of language from your grandparents to your parents of your parents. Like it has evolved to become what you are. And the way we look at things very, we lock ourselves wells up and we have these individual thoughts about what we are and such, but we are much more than that. We're much more than this flawed idea, this dysfunctional idea of the self, and this selfishness that we talk about, and this selfishness that we even on a core level channel our safety or our love or our core needs is actually flawed. And the moment you can let that go, you can literally merge on a very subconscious level. And the moment you become selfless and you just start seeing things for what they are, then suddenly making sense is no threat anymore. It's just what you are. It's basically the moment you let go of these things, you can just put the light on, and putting the light on is making sense. Making sense just allows you to truly understand your own essence in the most optimal way. And doing so allows you to grow. But when you say you, it is the organism. It is the collective awareness. It's not just this flawed idea of you. And I will give you guys a few examples just so you guys have some more insight in how it translates for me. When I come up with an insight, and I already said that, if I cannot explain it to other people, I think it's completely useless. Like literally, that's really like, I don't care about insights if I cannot communicate them. And it's just like, because I'm extremely aware of the collective awareness. I want to contribute. If other people grow here, I literally experience it as growth. That's why I care so much. It's like parents having children. They're really connected to their children, and their growth is in a sense their growth as well. It's like this idea of identity dissolves. Like when you think family is important, it's because on a certain level you're very connected with your family. But the thing is, like, it goes even further than that. It goes further than family. It goes to what you are back in the past, up till the Big Bang, up till to what you are now with everybody around you. And if you want to understand, if the essence wants to understand itself, if the essence wants to go about these things in a way that is in line with reality, being aware of these things and being able to dissolve these dysfunctional beliefs really will allow you to grow like crazy. So that's the idea, that's the insight. I don't know to which extent this is in any shape or form useful for people. I don't know to which extent it's understandable, but I do want to say that if you experience your selfishness properly, it is selflessness. Selfishness is just a wrong interpretation from what you are. It's just a wrong interpretation of the selfless. Everybody is, in a sense, selfless, but has just dysfunctional beliefs that are limiting them from seeing it that way because of how you grew up and how you've been, pointed out by your environment, saying like, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta have good points, you gotta do that. Like you literally live in a society where that is really so much like strengthened. So we just start growing up in a dysfunctional way. But in a society where people would grow up in a selfless way, you wouldn't have to deal with any of these issues. These issues are literally obstacles that have been created by a misunderstanding of what we are.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow the real Athene on Snapchat.